Hi, and welcome again to the Path to Profit podcast. I'm here with my wife, Dr. Minette Riordan. I'm Brad Dobson, and we're excited to welcome back to the podcast, Lisa Marie Platske.
You're actually the first person that we had back to the show.
Wow!
We had Tony Wilkins. Yep. You're only the second person in a year and a half
you should
that
still
we've
be
had
proud.
back. Yes, yeah.
I am.
Yeah, super
Welcome
exciting.
again.
Yes. And so what we're talking about today is leadership. And I love Lisa Marie's philosophy, perspective, and creativity around leadership. So we're going to dive into that. But first, you want to share a quote for today?
Yeah, definitely. And somehow Minette scared up a Stephen King quote for October. You can, you should, and if you're brave enough to start, you will. Yeah, Stephen King. Cool
and
stuff.
I love that from a leadership perspective as well. So we know a lot about Lisa Marie. In fact, we just spent the last half an hour chatting because we're so excited to see each other. It's been way too long. But let me share with all of you who are listening or watching today a little bit more about her formal background. So one of the things that I think gives Lisa Marie a really unique perspective is that she left her action-packed life as a federal law enforcement officer to become the CEO of international leadership training and consulting company, Upside Thinking. And if you don't follow her on social media, you should, because she asks provocative questions and shares some of the best quotes. But her non-traditional career began with a stint on the piers of New York, where she became one of the fastest promoted women in the U.S. Customs Service. She's gone on to become a national and an international speaker, to work with people in the nonprofit sector, to work with super big businesses, all the way down to brand new startups, helping them understand how to become leaders in their business. And I think that she just makes people leaders. Like, I don't know how you do it, Lisa Marie, but it's really magical. And also, we're going to talk more about this later, but she's the founder of Design Your Destiny Live, which is an amazing 3-day event happening in January of 2018 in Los Angeles at one of the prettiest hotels near the airport. It's one of my favorite places down there. I've been to this event. It is life-changing. So I cannot say enough. We'll make sure in the show notes we have links to find out more. And at the end of the show, we'll also get Lisa Marie to share a little bit more. And she lives in Alexandria, Virginia. And you know, this is my favorite part to share with her awesome husband, Jim. But the best part is they're 2 pet foxes. I love to talk about the foxes. So welcome, Lisa Marie. As always, it's an honor, a pleasure, and a privilege. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to come and join us.
Thank you so much for having me, Brad and Minette. And I love my foxes too. In fact, yesterday when I traveled back home, and taxi driver brought my husband and myself back, and he said, "Oh my gosh," he said, "that's a fox," right outside the door, and said, "Yep, that's a fox." So there they are, and healthy as can be.
I love it. So, we know we have them here, but we very rarely see them out in the neighborhood.
They're
We see the coyotes a lot.
Yeah, foxes are pretty shy.
Yeah, and we heard they were around in Nova Scotia when we were there this summer, but we didn't see them there either. But anyway, we could talk about foxes all day long. Started, we were talking about messenger bots and webinars and all kinds of stuff, but let's dial it back in and talk about transformational leadership.
What is transformational
leadership? So that is exactly what I was going to ask. What is transformational leadership? It's a good day.
That's love. That's love. Transformational leadership. Well, transformational leadership is actually a term in the 1990s. It actually started as transforming leadership, and it was started in political context. When I think about transformational leadership, and I use my own definition, leadership being influence and transformation being the ability to affect change, and to affect change in a significant manner. That for me is what I believe that most people who start a business, most people who are actually doing whatever it is that they love in the world want to do. They want to make a difference, they want to influence, and they want to do it in a way that has a lasting impact for others. So transformational leadership, putting it all together, is all those pieces.
I love it. Making a difference, creating change, and having impact.
Yeah.
In a nutshell, really, really beautiful.
I love the way one of your questions, suggested questions, is, why is this topic important? And it's like, how could it not be important?
Because we're not talking about messenger bots, which we don't want to
Right.
talk about.
Yeah,
Because I think that one of the reasons why with that question is that many people assume that leadership comes in a corporate setting, or leadership is a term that's written often for people who have titles. And it's not necessarily viewed as we each have a choice to be a leader of our own lives, in our communities, in our families. And all of that is about influence for a positive impact or difference. And I even had a client who worked in a very large company, a senior executive, and we had a conversation, and she said to me, I've never viewed myself as somebody who was to make a difference in the world. I always thought that my responsibility was to get up and provide for my family, and that's why I go to work. And yet there's this element where you challenge me to say, how are the actions that I'm taking making a difference for the people around me, making a difference for the employees or the colleagues or my husband or anyone that I'm connecting with or my life crosses paths with. And so even that perspective, to be able to say that it's important, I'm not even sure that it's conscious or intentional for many people to label themselves leader unless it came with a title at a particular job or particular position that they've held. And yet it could be part of every moment of your day.
That's neat. Yeah, I think I wonder if a lot of it is just that people aren't brought up in that context.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some people are born fully operational as leaders, I think, but it just came out in their genes. But I think the bulk of people, it's not part of who they are naturally.
Yeah.
Who they were ever encouraged to be as a child or growing up. And so they're not able to put it in context. Yet, like you said, with interconnectedness, everything they do has an effect on the people
Mm-hmm.
around them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably scary for a lot of people, probably really empowering for a lot of people to be told, you actually are a leader. You need to step into those shoes.
And I'm curious, because you've been talking about this topic for a number of years now, both, one-on-one with clients and on stages around the world. Why are you so passionate about transformational leadership?
I'd say that the reason is because I transformed me. Yeah. That I was one of those people that Brad describes that didn't recognize the choice that I had. And when I was working in law enforcement, I had this job that I liked, and I was rather unaware and couldn't figure out why I was struggling in the role that I had, why much of the knowledge that I had wasn't taken serious, or why, you come up with 1,001 reasons. Okay, I'm a woman, I'm blonde. You can come up with and make up poor stories about what it could be. But when I actually went to a leadership course and did some self-assessments and some team assessments, I discovered that in fact it was me and my behaving and the way that I interacted with the world. And to really sum it up, the instructor stood over me and said, if Lisa invites you to do something, she doesn't really want you to say yes. And if you invite her to do something, she doesn't really want to spend time with you. And I had scored a 0 in an interpersonal skills assessment. And you can't get much lower than a 0. I'm sorry?
I say that's a wake-up call.
Oh my, you're not kidding. And people didn't want to talk to me. I was ostracized from the class for the rest of that weekend. I can't tell you how hard I cried. And, even saying this here is a bit uncomfortable.
Sure.
And so, you just, it's not much lower than a 0. And so when that's the case, there's either the choice of I'm going to crawl in a hole and hide for the rest of my life, or I'm going to have to go through some sort of transformation to figure out how I can be the kind of person that people want to be around, that not only just be around, but follow. If my goal is to assume leadership within the government, I didn't know at the time I would be starting my own business, then how in the world am I going to do this if people don't even want to be around me? It's a problem. It's a real problem. And so, I look at it and say, wow, leadership and transformational leadership, it's possible. You can do it. I've done it. There's probably nobody that I know who's lower than a 0, it works. It makes a difference.
Yeah, it's
and so I'm passionate about it.
Yeah, I love that story, and thank you for being willing to share that and to share that journey and to think about how far you've come since then, that you're now, people want to spend time with you. Right? You're happily married and you have great friends and great community. I mean, so not only is the impact been huge on your business, but I can only imagine that in your personal life, it's had a beautiful impact as well, and how you get to show up there. So where do people go wrong when they think about transformational leadership? So you told us a great story of just kind of total lack of awareness, but even once you have awareness, I'm sure there's mistakes that people make.
Sure. And I would say that the number one misconception, if you will, is that vulnerability is depositioning. And so when I was willing to get curious and to get vulnerable and to change my own languaging and learn, expand my vocabulary to include I don't know or I don't have an answer for that, the real conversations and the willingness for people, I don't believe anybody in the world wants you to fail. Ultimately, human beings want other human beings to succeed. They want them to do well and to do great in the world. And so when I got out of my own way and began asking for help, it was amazing how much support I had within that career and when I opened the doors to my business. And so, vulnerability is not depositioning. It's just uncomfortable. But if comfort changed the world, there'd be the world.
I would be a world beater.
So
I'm interested. Sorry, I'm interested, especially in law enforcement, but I guess just generally, does that vulnerability statement resonate a lot more easily with your female audience than your male audience?
It's a great question. And I would say that it's more digestible, more easily digestible for the female audience. And with the male audience, it requires more conversation around it. However, when I was in the government and working on the piers with some really tough as nails guys, when something significant happened, they never went to my male counterpart, something significant in their personal lives. They always came to me.
Right.
And it wasn't because I was a female. It was because at that point, there were elements of my life that I had disclosed, including, for example, my faith journey. I mean, in government and in uniform with a badge and a gun, not a lot of people talking about God. And I felt that disclosing all of the parts of who I was, not that I had these big, long God conversations, but it wasn't an element that was hidden. It was just simply that if somebody asked me what I did or where I was or what I thought, I was as transparent and open as possible. And that is what vulnerability is. It's not a depositioning piece, because it's just more about you being you versus the facade of what you think other people want to see in you. And so for the men, what they could never figure out without putting a finger, without in articulating it, was that they didn't whatever was going on was perfectly acceptable. And so when one of my staff had a wife who joined a cult and signed their son up for it, the person that he came to was me, and the person who gave him resources was me, and the employee whose daughter had to be committed for harming herself. My boss was more concerned about, did he fill out the leave slip? And I was more concerned about the human component of, oh my gosh, this is like life changing, and this is your child. And so I find that the men, it involved more modeling and more explanation. And with the women, they tended to be more acceptive of that. And what I'll say is that is only not always in law enforcement, because the expectation in law enforcement is that you're strong and tough and you're smart and right. And so, excuse me. So for some of the women, there was a lot of barrier around it. And I found more ease when I left the government with the vulnerability piece. So it's a balance.
Interesting.
So how would you define vulnerability? Because it's become a bit of a buzzword thanks to the amazing Brene Brown, and everybody's talking about it. Just like, a decade ago, it was authenticity and think outside the box. And right now, it's a bit of a buzzword. So what does it mean to you?
Well, for me, vulnerability is the ability to be able to be comfortable just as you are, and not to spend time thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be here with Brad and Manette, and so I have to put on my best business face and show up. And in an hour I'm going to be talking to that client, and so I have to put on the best coach in the world hat and do that. And it's exhausting to do that. And so vulnerability to me is giving yourself permission to be who you are in the whole range of emotions and the entire range of being, without worrying about what other people think or will say or will do. And that's the most uncomfortable part of it. And it's not the same as being visible is not the same as being seen. Lots of people are really visible. Not a lot of people are seen for who they are. So it's something for me that is more of a modeling than it is even though I've done keynotes on it, it's not really about, the research that I've done has been in my own life. I'm not a formal researcher like Brene Brown. However, I find that modeling feminine, vulnerable leadership allows people to see that it's possible to have it without depositioning your expertise. Doesn't go away.
Well put. And I think she models it beautifully herself.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And it is an uncomfortable journey to be standing on stage in front of a room full of hundreds of people and sharing your story vulnerably.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's so I just
but it's the authenticity that actually people
gravitate
flock to. They gravitate to.
Yeah. And I loved what you said about just the way you put how vulnerability is about being comfortable just as you are, and being comfortable with your whole range of human emotions, right? So even it's deeper than that authenticity. It's like being okay with your sadness, being okay with your joy. I talk about Maggie, our daughter, all the time. Like, she's just joyful, right? And so when she's not, it's weird, right? Because it's not her normal state. Like, since childhood, she's just this little joyful being. Or you go to the grocery store. In fact, I did this the other day, and there's a little girl with her mom, and she's a little bit older, and usually I see him a little bit younger, maybe 8 or 9. So enough awareness to be conscious of people around her. And she's just dancing and singing, and she sees me looking at her, and I just smiled, and she kept going. But if I had looked at her and frowned, she probably would have stopped.
May have stopped. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so just that vulnerability is a two-way street, right? It's a conversation as well. So I think the courage comes from holding the place of vulnerability and inviting other people to step in with us.
Yes. And I think not making assumptions, because I mentioned to you that I that I'm in a mastermind, and in the mastermind, I was smiling, and I smile. I'm a smiler. My name of my business is Upside Thinking. It's difficult to go places and be a downside thinker when your business is upside thinking. I'm a smiler. And so I'm smiling, and one of the guys said, "You must be really happy to be here, really excited." And I said, "Actually, I'm just a smiler and I'm scared to death." And he said, "Really?" And I said, "Yes." I said, "I am scared to death to see what will come out of this." Yeah. And so the ability to be vulnerable is also being comfortable with that, even when other people make assumptions about what vibes or message that you're putting out there, and not to just say, "Well, yeah, I'm okay," or "Yeah, you're right, I am happy. Yeah, I really," that's exhausting. If you continue to do that for the rest of your life, and it will lead to burnout. So
I love that.
So how can, maybe this is a traditional male question.
Good.
How can you project strength in leadership, being a strong leader, and at the same time state your fears like you just did in terms of, I'm scared to death being here, what will come out of this? How do those things match up?
It's a great question. So you've probably walked into a room before, and perhaps for yourself, or you've witnessed somebody else where they just walk in and they take up all of the space in the room. Perhaps, like I say, you've done it yourself, or you've witnessed somebody else do that. And so there's a certain presence, confidence that comes from knowing who you are and who you're not, understanding what you're capable of and what your areas of development are. That is really an embodied presence. And there are people that you meet and you just go, wow, like that person, they are a leader. Like you just can feel it from who they are. And it's because of the 20 years that they've been doing things that you perhaps haven't seen the behind the scenes. And so when I say something like that, I don't believe that it takes anything away from the who I am or the what I know, when I'm just simply present to the moment and what I'm experiencing. And so I think that's one of the things that ends up being a misconception also in vulnerability and leadership, is that being open doesn't mean that you disclose every single thing about where you are at every moment in the day. It simply means that you're capable of being okay with whatever it is that you're experiencing, that your goal isn't to hide it. And so when you ask, how do they both operate together? How do they work in partnership? It's that I am a leader, and the research that I've done in having my business for 13 years, or being in this field of leadership for 25 years, and teaching at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center and doing the thesis work I've done, and all of that is still a part of my heart, my mind, and my soul. Like it is all true. And there are still days when I'm sitting at my desk trying to figure something out, and I'm in tears and I can't figure it out. And I figure that there must be something wrong with me, because it seems like the answer is so close and I can't figure it out. And in those moments, or the moments when I'm someplace else, like at that event in front of all these leaders, it's the ability to, once again, with vulnerability, to be able to experience that range of emotions and be okay. So they can operate simultaneously, and they don't have to operate separately, because it is not, one does not detract from the other. Once again, going back to vulnerability is not depositioning. Now, if it's the space that you live in all the time, where everywhere you go, you talk about how bad things are going and that's all you do, well then, yeah, you're right. It will erode your credibility. For me, I don't look at it as being, your presence is, your knowledge, your I use the word gate, your gifts, your abilities, your talents and your experiences are the gateway, and those don't change. People can't take those away from you. Brad, did that answer the question?
Well, it did for me. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Right. And so I'm thinking about this whole range of emotions. And when I've seen leaders really stand in that space of vulnerability, there was one of Brene Brown's audios that I listened to where it's not being vulnerable when you're just telling this story to get empathy, right? When you're just going into your sob story, that's not leadership, right? I mean, it really is being okay with who we are now. And really, it's funny because we just recorded another podcast before this one where we're talking about the hero's journey story, and it's being willing to share our hero's journey story and give people hope that these amazing leaders are just humans, right? I think the part that's so important to remember is that no matter what they've done or accomplished, we all still put our pants on one leg at a time. Right?
Oh, I don't.
Jump in
on the floor and jump into them both at the same time.
That's right. Trapeze.
Trapeze.
Sorry.
You're such a goofball. So if I'm someone who maybe is starting a company, or I've been owning my own company, because this is one of the places where we see our clients get stuck, maybe you have a story that you could share that would just show a little bit, how do you step into leadership? Because I see women in particular really struggle with just taking on the mantle, not even a superhero cape, but really taking on the mantle of leadership at the helm of their businesses.
I think that's a great question. And I think that it's, and it is the area where the claiming it, as you mentioned, is the first piece. So I got to claim it, that this is where I'm going to go. And when I opened my business, because I wanted this for myself and I couldn't quite figure out how, in owning a business, what are the leadership qualities that are most important? What are the steps or the pillars? So I asked myself the same question that you're asking, or that other clients may have asked. And I started to interview people. I would go around and ask people who had successful businesses, who might be in business for 30 years or worked in companies, what did you do? And what did that look like? And I came up with 7 themes that are part of my 7 pillars of leadership. And it really is the starting point that I see for anybody who wants to claim or own or step into being a courageous leader worth following. And that is to start with a written plan. Lots of people have ideas in their head, and individuals who share that, this is not necessarily the easiest thing for them to sit down. We're not talking about anything complicated. I know, Manette, this is something that you help people with so easily. Starting with a written plan, that's critical. And you have to begin with the end in mind about what you want. And then the second pillar that I ended up having conversations around was understanding your personality. We all have strengths and areas of development within our personality that affect how we implement the plan. And if you don't identify those, it's going to be very difficult to accomplish what you want in your plan. I have people on my team who, on a DISC assessment, they're very low in making decisions. That's their low skill set. It means that if I give them something and don't give them the specific parameters, they are less likely to make a decision. This is problematic if you own your own business and you're the one that's the final decision maker. The third element is partnerships, creating powerful partnerships, viewing the world as a fun, happy, non-competitive space, and believing that everybody has your greatest good in mind. And so some elements around that. The fourth one is to live your own priorities. Don't compare yourself to what somebody else is doing. Really understand that your priorities are more important than understanding what should be best. you have the great benefit of working with Brad, Manette, and I don't work with my husband, and you have children and I don't have children. There's different, our priorities are different, how we would both categorize that. And for each person, I find that a lot of times they'll look at what works for someone else, and it doesn't make sense for them. And number 5 is presence. And that is to create a meaningful and memorable presence. And there's 3 areas to presence that include positioning, and that include image, and that include your branding, knowing what to say, who to say it to, and when to say it. And then the 6th pillar is progress and profit, being able to understand what that looks like. And the final one is investing in professional development. Both personal and professional development, something within your own industry and something outside your industry, at least once a year, so that you're getting new ideas in. Leaders are readers and learners are earners, and you can't expand your own what you have to give to the world without expanding your own mind and your own heart and bringing in new ideas. So that's one of the things I loved about this conversation prior to the podcast, is that it's, every time I get together with you, it's, what are the resources you've heard about? What are the resources you've heard about? And it's just, a great collaboration to be able to dive in and do that. So I find that foundation to being a leader worth following is really important. And for some people, they may have, 4 out of the 7, or they may have most of them in place, and making those small tweaks, really starting with that written plan and beginning with the why.
I love that. Become a leader worth following. Say more about that. Or were you going to ask a question?
No, I was just going to say, I like the intentionality of it. That
yeah.
You've systematized what it takes to get your leadership on.
Thank you.
And I'm taking lots of notes here. Since you were on the show last time, one of the things we do now is we create fun little sketch shows. So that'll be part of the promotion afterwards. So if I'm not looking at you, it's because I'm taking all these awesome notes about all the juiciness of what you said. So I love that. Your 7 pillars are just brilliant. I know this is part of what you teach at Design Your Destiny. So maybe that would be a nice transition to talk a little bit about that event, and then share how people can connect and learn more.
Sure. Thank you. So Design Your Destiny Live, we do teach the 7 pillars at that event in January. And this year we're doing that at the Air Suites. That's the beautiful hotel you spoke about, and in Manhattan Beach in January, because it's one of the few warm places in the country at that time, on January 25th, 26th, and 27th. And the 7 pillars that we walk through, we spend on each day, we look at a few of the pillars, and then the goal is that you're able to map out what you can take action on starting on Monday, so that you end up with, if it's priorities is where you need to look, if partnerships is where you need to look, to be able to have some tools in your toolbox in those particular areas and out of those 7 pillars. And I find it to be a very transformational, magical experience. And for me, I get to model what it looks like to be a vulnerable feminine leader. I have my own things that each year that don't go exactly the way I planned. And I really pull the curtains back so that as attendees are there, they get to experience the ups and downs and the highs and lows, and not only the perfect performance, if you will.
Yeah, and admire all the outfit and shoe changes.
So yes, those too.
So it's so fun to watch Lisa Marie in action. Great content. I know you bring in a few additional speakers as well that really augment the content and take it deeper in some of the areas. Like I'm thinking specifically when I was there, and you had an image consultant there who did such a beautiful job of really talking about how important it is to dress in a way that's authentic to your brand, right? Who's one of our other friends and an amazing speaker and woman. I don't know if she'll be there again.
Yes, she will not be on stage this year. However, she will be attending, And one of the people that I'm having this year is a researcher who has researched authenticity for the last 20 years. And what does that look like for, once again, being a leader worth following? What does that look like for taking action and actually implementing? So she's sharing her research.
Is that Norma Hollis by any chance?
It is.
We just interviewed her on the
Did
podcast.
you?
Yeah.
Oh, she's so dear. She's just so dear.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, she's I've met her a couple of times, interviewed her for different things a couple of times, and absolutely loved her work on authenticity. It was one of our favorite interviews. Pretty
it was
cool.
Good stuff.
She's part of an organization that I belong to, and we've known each other for several years, and it'll be wonderful to share her research on stage.
Awesome. And the website is just designyourdestinylive.com, right?
You got it. You need that word live in there.
Yes.
Doesn't
work without that. I'll put that in the show notes, designyourdestinylive.com. And then if they just wanted to connect with you personally or learn more about Upside Thinking, where would be the best place to send them for that?
At upsidethinking.com.
It's so easy and obvious, but we're going to say it anyway.
Just decide, yes, there. And there's, Minette, I'm happy to share with you. I have the first pillar, that pillar on the beginning with your end in mind, on how to be able to really set clear goals, especially moving into the final quarter and beginning of the year. I'll send you information on a webinar that I have. That people can take advantage of at any time if they're interested. It will give them a jump start on those 7 pillars.
Yeah, we'll put that information.
We'll put that in the show notes.
Okay.
Yeah, so be sure and email that to us, and we'll make sure we get that in there as well. Thank you. That's super, super generous.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it's always such a pleasure to have you. I'm just this felt like this beautiful, thoughtful, more philosophical place to be today than some of our conversations, and it's very much appreciated.
Well, thank you. I thank you. And I'm practicing that. I'm practicing philosophy first, strategy second, tactics third. The tactics will always come, but if the philosophy isn't in place, you can't create a great strategy, and your tactics won't be as effective. Yeah. If it doesn't come from something, right? So
that might be some of the best business advice or most concise best business advice we've had.
Yeah, and it's what I know to be true, and what I'm realizing, like just in the marketing field, is people are so stuck in tactics, but they've forgotten about the importance of the philosophy.
Right.
And that the philosophy, even that, comes before the strategy. So beautifully put.
So I have to pull myself back. Thank you.
Definitely golden nugget. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, for your talent, for your genius, and for modeling what it looks like to be a vulnerable transformational leader. So super exciting. So I'm Dr. Minette Riordan. This is Brad Dobson. We are the Path to Profit podcast. Go leave us some love on iTunes. We'd love some comments, feedback. Go share your favorite nugget from Lisa Marie today. Let us know what part of this talk was most impactful for you, because I know we love the feedback, and so do our guests. So, and show up at designyourdestinylive.com and check out Lisa Marie's event in January. Thanks, Lisa Marie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Bye now.